We begin our work with Frankenstein by taking a look at the strange structure that Mary Shelley has chosen for this particular novel. It opens with a series of letters, and this video will include a reading of letter 1. There will be a separate video for each of the remaining letters in that opening section of the book. So let's take a look at what Mary Shelley is kind of accomplishing here. First of all, it's important to remember that Mary Shelley was right around the age of 18 when she began writing this novel. She had a very strange and tumultuous kind of life and experience as part of the process of coming to this. So she's a very young and inexperienced writer. This, as far as we know, is her first major work that she's attempted, even though she's surrounded herself with, and both of her parents are very well-known writers of the day. So let's take a look first at what Mary Shelley, kind of the basic overall structure is. It's often called a frame narrative. Okay, so we open the novel with a series of letters between a Captain Walton and his sister Margaret Saville. Robert Walton is stuck aboard a ship. They are stuck on the ice floe of the Arctic, and he is writing a series of letters to his sister to kind of tell a little bit about who he is and what he's experiencing, and to gain her support. We will also move from Captain Walton's letters into the narrative of Victor Frankenstein, the kind of monomaniacal scientist who has created this creature. And that is the bulk of the book, will be his narrative. Embedded inside of that, we will see the creature's story, where the creature will tell his side of it. And then within the creature story, he allows another story to be told called the story of the DeLacy family. And then within that family, there's a separate story called Sapphi's story. So what is the point of Mary Shelley using this many buffers between, why doesn't she just write one story told by Victor Frankenstein? And I think we can gain a little bit of that if we keep in mind the idea of the Russian nesting dolls. So if you've ever seen these before, my guess is you've seen pictures, or you may have something like this in your home. What you get in these Russian nesting dolls is a series of dolls that are all similar shape but smaller. And then as you pull them apart, you get these nested figures. But each figure, if you look a little closer, there's something stylistically unique about each one. So they're not identical, even though they are highly, highly similar. And so I think if we keep that in mind, if we go back to this overall structure, what we see with Mary Shelley is she's using each of these stories as a mini version of this larger story of Victor Frankenstein. So the background that Robert Walton will give us about his life, his upbringing, his passions, is a mirror image of the upbringing and life of Victor Frankenstein. And so what we get here is this series of nested dolls, each one giving more and more support for a singular story about ambition, being unchecked, being abandoned to some extent, and maybe feeling unloved. So Mary Shelley's really created something interesting here. And I also want to get to this notion at the core of all of these nested stories within this frame. We find a clue in Mary Shelley's actual title. The book is entitled Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. Now, we often leave this last part out, and the book is usually, when you pick it up in a bookstore, is just called Frankenstein. But I think it's very intentional that when we look at the modern Prometheus, and I'll be talking about this later, there are actually two versions of the Prometheus story. And the one that I think we have relevant for our structure here is this idea of Prometheus being this source of a savior for mankind. He is the Titan who steals fire from the mountaintop of the gods, and he gifts it to mankind, so that mankind can move forward and not be some kind of dumb slave-like animal for the gods. And as punishment for that, Prometheus is bound to a mountaintop where an eagle comes and eats his liver every day, giving him eternal torment. And so he is tormented by the very thing that he has tried to accomplish. And as a Titan, he cannot experience death, unlike the humans. So what we have here is the idea of these figures assuming the role of light giver, light bringer, this modern Prometheus who's going to be the savior of mankind. And it begins when we meet our very first character, and that is Captain Walton. And so as I read through this, if you want to follow along, which you'll get is a reading, an audio reading of it, as well as a look at the text, which you can follow along if you like. Frankenstein. Letter 1. To Mrs. Saville, England, St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied the commencement of an enterprise which you have regarded with such evil forebodings. I arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking. I am already far north of London, and as I walk in the streets of Petersburg, I feel a cold northern breeze play upon my cheeks, which braces my nerves and fills me with delight. Do you understand this feeling? This breeze which has traveled from the regions toward which I am advancing gives me a foretaste of those icy climes. Inspirited by this wind of promise, my daydreams become more fervent and vivid. I try in vain to be persuaded that the pole is the seat of frost and desolation. It ever presents itself to my imagination as the region of beauty and delight. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible, its broad disk just skirting the horizon and diffusing a perpetual splendor. There, for with your leave, my sister, I will put some trust in preceding navigators. There, snow and frost are banished, and sailing over a calm sea we may be wafted to a land surpassing in wonders and in beauty every region hitherto discovered on the habitable globe. Its productions and features may be without example, as the phenomena of heavenly bodies undoubtedly are to those undiscovered solitudes. What may not be expected in a country of eternal light, I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle, and may regulate 1,000 celestial observations that require only this voyage to render their seeming eccentricities consistent forever. I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never before visited, and may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. These are my enticements, and they are sufficient to conquer all fear of danger or death, and to induce me to commence this laborious voyage with a joy a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. But supposing all these conjectures to be false, you cannot contest the inestimable benefit which I shall confer on all mankind to the last generation by discovering a passage near the pole to those countries to reach which at present so many months are requisite, or by ascertaining the secret of the magnet which, if at all possible, can only be effected by an undertaking such as mine. These reflections have dispelled the agitation with which I began my letter, and I feel my heart glow with an enthusiasm which elevates me to heaven. For nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye. This expedition has been the favorite dream of my early years. I have read with ardor the accounts of the various voyages which have been made upon the prospect of arriving in the North Pacific Ocean through the seas which surround the pole. You may remember that a history of all the voyages made for purposes of discovery composed the whole of our good Uncle Thomas's library. My education was neglected, yet I was passionately fond of reading. These volumes were my study day and night, and my familiarity with them increased that regret which I had felt as a child on learning that my father's dying injunction had forbidden my uncle to allow me to embark in a seafaring life. These visions faded when I perused for the first time those poets whose effusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in a paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I also might obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are consecrated. You are well acquainted with my failure, and how heavily I bore the disappointment. But just at that time I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into the channel of their earlier bent. 6 years have passed since I resolved on my present undertaking. I can even now remember the hour from which I dedicated myself to this great enterprise. I commenced my by inuring my body to hardship. I accompanied the whale fishers on several expeditions to the North Sea. I voluntarily endured cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep. I often worked harder than the common sailors during the day and devoted my nights to the study of mathematics, the theory of medicine, and those branches of physical science from which a naval adventurer might derive the greatest practical advantage. Twice I actually hired myself as an undermate in a Greenland whaler and acquitted myself to admiration. I must own I felt a little proud when my captain offered me the second dignity in the vessel and entreated me to remain with the greatest earnestness, so valuable did he consider my services. And now, dear Margaret, do I not deserve to accomplish some great purpose? My life might have been passed in ease and luxury, but I preferred glory to every enticement that wealth placed on my path. Oh, that some encouraging voice would answer in the affirmative. My courage and my resolution is firm, but my hopes fluctuate, and my spirits are often depressed. I am about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, the emergencies of which will demand all of my fortitude. I am required not only to raise the spirits of others, but sometimes to sustain my own when theirs are failing. This is the most favorable period for traveling in Russia. They fly quickly over the snow in their sledges. The motion is pleasant, and, in my opinion, far more agreeable than that of the English stagecoach. The cold is not excessive. If you are wrapped in furs, a dress with which I have already adopted, for there is a great difference between walking the deck and remaining seated motionless for hours when no exercise prevents the blood from actually freezing in your veins. I have no ambition to lose my life on the post road between St. Petersburg and Archangel. I shall depart for the latter down in a fortnight or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary, among those who are accustomed to the whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June, and when shall I return? Ah, dear sister, how can I answer this question? If I succeed, many, many months, perhaps years will pass before you and I may meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon or never. Farewell, my dear excellent Margaret. Heaven shower down blessings on you and save me, that I may again and again testify my gratitude for all your love and kindness. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton. And so we close this opening letter with this kind of closing remark from Walton. You can tell the love that he feels for his sister, but also his hesitation in promising her that he will return soon. He understands the dangers that he's facing, but his ego seems really hard at work in this first letter. We can see that he wants to be a name. He wants to be famous. He's guided by that Promethean ideal of bringing light and being this somehow savior of mankind. If he can find this either miraculous Northwest Passage as a shortcut for the European traders, or somehow discover the secrets of the polar magnetic field. Either way, he's bound. Now, of course, at this point in the story, Victor Frankenstein, it hasn't even been mentioned, but it's worth noting that the story of Captain Walton, his early upbringing, is going to be highly similar to what we see. It's a parallel. It's one of those opening nesting dolls that we talked about early in this video. Stay tuned for video 2.